because I kept wondering, how is it that if we're all living on the same planet, but then you're saying you're not. Yeah, so then I was like, well, no, the only way that it's possible that everyone starts seeing synchronicities based on them.
Yes.
It would mean that there is no physical reality.
There isn't.
Yeah, and it's appearing within this it's appearing in 12, like let's say there's 8 billion beings on the planet. There's 8 billion worlds.
Yes.
Totally a reflection of themselves.
Yes.
But somehow we're all
and most of, I won't say all, most of the 7 billion individuals are not only creating their own world experience, they are also co-creating a place that is called the shared world, so that you can interact from world to world by having this simulation of a shared world that you all think you live on, even though you don't.
So, holy cannoli. There's this thing that happens sometimes when you have, some people call it a download, some people call it a knowing. Basically, it is this point at which you just instantaneously know something that you didn't know before. It's like remembering something that you never learned in the first place. And I used to think, I must have learned that somewhere. But then I realized, nope, because that hasn't been a thing in the zeitgeist yet. It just hasn't existed before. But now all of a sudden, a month or two after I had the idea, the knowing, the thing that I know for sure is the way that reality exists, I'm reading that there is some scientific paper coming out talking about the thing, the idea that I had, and all of a sudden, it does exist from a scientific vantage point. And I'm just like, holy shit, that is awesome. And in this case, I just talked about how we make our own reality. We live in our own existence. It's a hologram. We live in our own reality. Everybody has their own individual universe, and we just kind of interact like a dance, right? You just kind of go back and forth and interact with other people's universes. And I just made a TikTok about that a couple of weeks ago. And then I saw this video pop across my feed of Bouchard saying the same thing, that there's all these different universes. And I was like, yes. And the scientific term for that would be the multiverse. So it's already existed, but I didn't think of it like the butterfly effect or the multiverse or however you want to think about it. But I hadn't ever thought about it before as if it was like all of these different universes that everybody has their own individual one. I kind of thought of it as like everybody's tossed into one universe and your choices throw you into another universe and you go this way and that way constantly in and out of different universes. But no, it's like a write your own story. You are just popping in and out of other people's universes. And sometimes certain facts like misalign, which is where you get the Mandela effects and things like that, right? Like Berenstein, Bears, things like that. So to see Bouchard saying the same thing was just like, ha, I knew it. And so I love when that freaking happens. It's just super exciting for me. And so that is what I want to talk about, was the knowing, the downloads per se, because the cool thing is, in case you are unaware of how this works, if you've never had a download, and I think the people that I'm talking to are probably the people who have them all the time. I don't get them very often. I get them, there are some people who get downloads like every day. I do not. But when I get them, it's more like, oh yeah, that's how reality has always been. How did I forget that? It's just kind of like, oh, I know that that's how it is. And you just kind of go forward with your life. And I'm not going to be like, hey, I got this download. Some people are like that. They'll be like, hey, I got this download. Because to my mind, if you're talking to someone who is rational and you're saying something about a download that you just intuited from the universe around you, they're going to be like, this is a crazy person. And they're going to turn around and walk away, and they're not going to listen to anything that you have to say. So they're going to think that you're nuts, and they're going to walk away. So if you want people to take you seriously, you have to just share the information, right? It's not going to have a source because you are the source, but you're going to share the information, right? And the coolest thing is, every single time, like I have these wacky ideas all the time that aren't downloads. Those are different. Those are like, hey, I'm just thinking about stuff and I wonder if this is how it is. That's normal thinking. No, when you have a knowing, a download or whatever, it is like absolutely 100%. I know it to the deepest core of my being that is how reality is. So when I have one of those, every single fucking time, I have found out later that there is some paper being written or some kind of thing being published or something being shared or something that already exists and I just never heard of it before. And it totally plays into this concept, this idea that we call it shared consciousness, right? Unity, like we are all like one. Everybody is one and we are also all our own universe. So that's a different concept too. So Oh, just totally confused, like the situation. That's something I want to talk about after. So, so you have this shared consciousness, right? Everybody is tapping into the same field. It's like the Akashic records or whatever. But from a scientific perspective, this is also being studied for real, and it is called the resonance theory of consciousness. And I am just like, ha! So science is also understanding that consciousness is coming from outside us. So what else does this mean? This means that there are people around the world, and this is over and over and over again. I forget what the actual, it's not the resonance theory of consciousness, but there is this other thing in nature that happens where if someone evolves, if someone in humanity or whatever achieves something new and revolutionary, within, however, it's relatively quickly after that, that an unrelated animal of the same species, totally separate from like that group of like that social group or whatever, they could be in a different country, a different county, a different whatever, they don't know each other, but all of a sudden that same species will learn the same thing that I think they studied this in monkeys. Some monkeys learned some kind of talent, and then these other monkeys very quickly, even though they never knew that the other monkeys existed, they learned the same trick. And that, like, you can see this happening in nature. We've recognized that this actually happens, right? So literally, it is like you are accessing the Akashic records. This is something, so when you hear spiritualists say that, or people who channel and they're talking to NHI or something like that, just other beings, and they are telling you these cool things about how this is something that I've heard like Dolores Cannon talk about, right? Where someone that she is interviewing or regressing, whatever, and she's there, that person is saying something about how all of the knowledge that humanity contains is sent out into the ether. It's not coming from our brains. It is coming from outside of us. And we are choosing to call it in and just claim that idea. So we're just hanging on to it and pulling it in, which is like in Greek lore, you have the muse where it's like, oh, this idea is coming from outside of me and I'm pulling it towards me. And it's not your idea, it's the muse giving you the idea. And literally, we are learning that that is how things actually are. And so, and I know that science is not ready to bridge the gap yet between spirituality and say, oh, that there is some other kind of force out there that's sending these things to us. But we are very quickly approaching the point at which we are seeing science and spirituality just kind of co-author the same concepts with different definitions, because they have this awkward, ooh, spirituality, ooh, science, ugh. And they're going to have to just learn to like get married at some point, because that is what is happening. And it's just so cool. So I just wanted to point that out, that sometimes when I talk about this stuff, yes, they are downloads. And yes, every single time that I share one of these ideas that sounds like it's a well-formed, it's because it's not from me. It's from the muse. And when you hear someone else talking about these things and people are like, where are you getting these ideas from? And they're like, I'm getting them from myself. They are channeling. They're downloading information. They are having a knowing. It is not necessarily unheard of at this point. We just don't understand this scientifically yet, but we will understand channeling scientifically eventually, because we're already on it. We are learning about it right now, and the more we learn about consciousness, and it is so freaking exciting. I love this shit, you guys. I eat this shit up. So I just had to share that, because this Bouchard video literally is talking about the same thing that I had talked about very recently, and I love when those kind of synchronicities happen. When that kind of shit happens, it just tickles my brain. I get so happy. Okay, bye. I forgot to mention, and to go back to the thing that I was going to mention, the whole how we're separate but one. Okay, so, sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once. So, I wanted to make sure that I didn't have the fully formed idea when I made the last video, because I didn't want to confuse people and say that we are all each in our own universe, but also we're only one thing, because that is confusing as hell, right? So, what I wanted to say is that even though we are in a hologram, let's just call it a hologram, because that is how our brains would understand it, right? So let's say we're in a hologram and we are each in our own hologram, and sometimes we're doing like this little dance back and forth where we're intermingling with other people's hologram, their own universe. There is also the very real concept that we are all also one. Everything conscious. Everything has consciousness. Think about this first. Okay, babe, don't. Everything has consciousness, right? Everything has consciousness. Now, this is how I want to explain it. Like, when I think of God, I have a very rather modern concept of God, right? Because I just got into spirituality, so I'm learning all of this stuff. So my concept of God is, hi guys, hi. My concept of God is that my concept of God sorry, super distracted, trying to make sure that they aren't naughty. So, all right. I think of God as plasma. I know that sounds, if you weren't initiated into like the spirituality conversation, that might sound completely insane. But I'm telling you right now that there is another state of matter, and it is everything. Oh my God, it is everything. Okay. So that state of matter, that is in everything. It's in the rocks. It's in us. It's in the walls. It's in the other animals. That would be plasma. So when I think of plasma, I think of that as being the spark of consciousness. And consciousness itself is in absolutely everything, right? So you've got like the bugs and the animals and the rocks. And I actually found a physicist, and I know that there's multiples of these. This is just, I was watching a video the other day, and there was a physicist who was working on, because he's more one of the fringe physicists, but he's actually very well educated and very intelligent. I think he went to Oxford or something. Anyway, and he had a long career before he got into studying consciousness, and he is trying to prove that trees have consciousness, which is not a far jump away when you think about mycelium and how we understand now that trees are having conversations with each other, and the medium in which they do that is mycelium. And so you have these conversations where people are like, yes, when you consume certain natural substances that also are probably how the trees are having conversations, that you are also using that same network to have conversations with the same way that trees probably have conversations. It's this kind of odd conversation where people are actually trying to discuss how consciousness actually works and what constitutes its consciousness and who deserves to be considered a person. That's always been the fun conversation, because we like to other every other thing, and we don't like to think of anyone but ourselves. And anytime that you have some animal that all of a sudden meets the definition of consciousness, like so that they consider the definition of personhood, like they can use tools or whatever, we just change the goalpost so that we're consistently not letting these beings that meet our former definition into the personhood club, so that we can keep othering them and so that we can keep using them. And that is horrifying, because that just is a way to make us feel like not guilty about, using other beings. Instead of being the stewards of the earth like we are supposed to be, we other every other being so that we can use it like a resource instead of taking care of it like we were supposed to. That was our calling. Our calling was to be able to steward the planet, not to use it up and chew it out. And that is where we are right now, currently on a planet. So anyway, that's a different conversation. Oh my God, I could keep going into these different conversations. But the point is that we are actually all part of the same plasma, the same God, source, whatever you want to say. It is inside all of us, inside all of creation. And we are all co-creating, this reality with the consciousness that is God. So the whole idea of God is everywhere. You can't hide from God. God knows all. That's literally true, because God literally is in everything. If you think about, and NASA just fucking confirmed that this part of the universe, the whole part of the universe, is in a giant plasma cloud, right? So we are all in this giant, it's like a God bubble. We're in a God bubble. This part of the universe is. So we exist because plasma exists, because the ether exists. Other people call the plasma ether. We just renamed it. Scientists renamed ether to plasma. Doesn't matter. Again, science wanting to be all icky with, don't want to get all with spirituality and stuff. And there's kind of a connotation with ether that is, more in the woo-woo, and science doesn't like the woo-woo. But here's the thing again, we're going to have to get to a point where we recognize that the two disciplines complement each other. That's what I meant when I said that they're just going to have to get married, because it's not complete without the other. The spirituality without the science side, it doesn't give you the complete story. The secular side does not give you the complete story. And it's wild to me. Now I sit back and I listen to people who I still respect, who are atheists, because I was an atheist for so long. And I'm just like, oh, you're missing part of the story, because you're only thinking about it from a secular position and you're not taking into account X, Y, and Z. And I do that constantly, because I still like listening to these people, because there's still interesting topics that are talked about. But it is wild, though, because I keep thinking about, and then you listen to people who are only religious, who don't believe in science, and that's a whole other level of, they need to complement each other. And they always have. And there have been some religions, and I'm not a fan of religion, who do attempt to marry spirituality with science. But I think that even still there are certain limitations. When you're talking about religion, there's also kind of control. So they kind of create the boundaries with which you can study something, because they are trying to, and this is something that was intentional and not something I think that we think about very often anymore. In fact, I think that religious scholars, like scientists, would not necessarily fall into the same camp today. But I know in the past, there were certain limitations on how you could do research that has certainly become the standard today. And it is basically materialism, right? So you have certain boundaries, and if you cannot tangibly touch it or whatever, then it becomes much more harder to define scientifically and to study scientifically. Not saying it's not possible, it's just more difficult. So it becomes a lot harder to be accepted and believed by the scientific community. You can be like, it's anecdotal, but when you say it's anecdotal, you basically can imagine like anybody who believes in science, like their brain just shutting off and not listening to anything you say after it's anecdotal. They'll be like, yeah, it's only anecdotal, but, and it's like, oh my God, no. Like there's so much more to this. But you can't study it because you can't study it within these certain parameters. And I understand that there's reasons why, but I also understand that the background of how we ended up there is a problem, and it's a whole thing. So the point is that I was trying to make, and this whole fucking thing, I don't even know how I got on a side tangent, was that we are all part of the same entity. That's how spooky action at a distance works. It's because it doesn't matter if you're from Mars or from here. You're still part of the same entity. We're still part of the same source. We are part of the same. So when we're talking about NHI and, oh my goodness, they're, you know, what if they're gonna, why would you come to conquer and kill something with which you are? Understand this, okay. So, if you were able to come from another star system to here, I'm not talking about like interdimensional beings or whatever, I'm talking about if a being were to come here, if a consciousness, if something is more intelligent than humanity is here, and not all of them, I'm not saying all of them are necessarily more intelligent than humans, I'm just saying that they are able to interact with us, and they are not human, right? But specifically, if you are able to comprehend more about how the universe exists than we can, then you're going to understand this one simple fucking concept. We are all the same entity. We are parts of the same whole. We're parts of the same whole. So, with that in mind, there is no reason on this fucking, in the universe, there is no reason why you would come to conquer, to enslave, to war with another race. That wouldn't make logical sense, because you'd be killing parts of yourself. You'd be conquering parts of yourself. And humanity, we have this concept of war and conquering and using up resources and taking up things because we want money and greed and all this thing, because we have this othering concept. We believe we're individuals and we're independent of each other. And so mine means it's not yours. But that is not the case. We are all part of the same reality, the same entity. So even though we all have our own universe, we are all also part of the same entity, because we are all plasma. And I know that's confusing, and some of this stuff I'm not really sure I fully understand how to, but I know that they're both reality also. I'll see you guys later.